This statement that drug trafficking is sort of the number one priority, give us some context. What is the situation here in France?
Well, number one priority indeed. You touched on it there, Will. France's second largest city, then continuing to grapple with the scourge of drugs. Drugs really on an unprecedented level at this stage. Gang warfare, as well, as you mentioned, being of growing concern. What does that mean on the ground? Well, we're seeing teenage groups increasingly exploited by criminal gangs. We're also seeing an increase in gun violence. And then victims of gun violence being younger and younger. Now, it wasn't in Marseille, but this week we know that a 12-year-old was killed at a drug dealing point in Grenoble. So we're seeing younger victims here being embroiled in this trade. That figure up there then shows you 10% of murders last year related to drug trafficking. Just to give you a firm figure there, 110 people out of 980 that were killed in France last year were linked to drug trafficking. In addition to this increased gun violence, we're seeing more influence, more power being wielded by these drug gangs. I can show you another figure which I think is important. In 2024, the French Senate estimates that the value of the illicit drug trade is between 3.5 and 6 billion euros. That, of course, posing an ever-growing threat to entire neighbourhoods, as we're seeing in Marseille, and indeed to the country's health system, because there are, obviously ongoing impacts there. I want to stay with this idea, Will, of power wielding by these big drug gangs. That was crystallised this week by the killing of 20-year-old Mehdi Kessaci, who, along with his brother Amin, had made something of a name for themselves as anti-narcotics advocates, if you will. They, of course, were carrying out various activities to denounce drugs in Marseille. Police say that they are inquiring over whether Amin, who's the more prominent, who's been kind of cited in the New York Times, who has written in Le Monde since, who's published a book, if he wasn't the real target of this killing, that Mehdi was collateral damage of that. They're also checking out to see whether this death or killing wasn't ordered from a jail cell by a mafia group that's well known in Marseille. What they're calling it, though, is an intimidation killing, saying that, anybody who dares to speak out against drug violence and their activities is pretty much going to face a lot of violence on their side.
So more powerful gangs, more victims, and this possible intimidation killing. What is the French government planning to do?
Well, the French government says that it's more than aware of what's going on. Let's start off with Gérald Darmanin, as you said, who visited the city of Marseille on Thursday. He's promised reinforcements when it comes to the justice system. He's talking about reinforcements when it comes to court clerks and also to magistrates, because, of course, get through the backlog of all of these drug-related crimes or drug-related cases, there are not enough staff to do so. He's also spoken about fighting corruption. Darmanin suggested that there are 10 cases underway at the moment looking at agents who've been providing information, who've been tipping off these drug gangs. And of course, that is impeding this whole process of bringing these criminal organizations to justice. If we look at the Emmanuel Macron, the president of the French Republic, he's spoken about doing better work to intercept drugs. Who obviously Marseille, a huge port city, drugs coming in there, but also France's airports are also where a lot of drugs are entering. So better detection systems and more cooperation with foreign judicial authorities. Of course, how do you intercept these people before they arrive in French waters or in French soil? So a real kind of, broader look at fighting drugs there. Just a final note on this. The Foreign Minister, Jean-Noël Barrot, has spoken about the need for an EU sanction proposal. So he's brought that up in Brussels. He wants to target not just the criminals, but those who are supporting them, notably people who are supplying weapons and those carrying out human trafficking.
And how have some of the government's opponents, political opponents, been reacting to all of this?
Well, it's a good question, Will. Emmanuel Macron got himself into a bit of hot water earlier this week when he spoke about urban middle class or bourgeois drug users fueling this narcotic drive, him saying that, look, there's no point in deploring death in the daytime and then consuming drugs at home in the evening. He said that they are ultimately drug users are complicit in this organised crime. That didn't go down so well with some political groups, notably France Unbowed, who said, there's no point in repressing the users. That's not a viable way to tackling France's unprecedented drug problem. Political opponents at the other end of the spectrum, notably the far right, have spoken about, Macron ultimately abandoning France in its dire need. They've called for the army to be called into some of these areas, particularly in Marseille, in a state of emergency. Well, the takeaway from this, Will, is that security is going to be a huge issue in the municipal elections coming up next year. The latest IFOP poll released on Sunday showed that security was a top concern for more than 76% of voters. So we can expect to hear about this issue for quite a while to come.
All right,